Welcome back to the Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing some innovative technology and tools to help protect us from wildfires. But you know, all the tools in the world don't do anything without the knowledge how to use them, where to use them, when to use them, etc. And so this is where we turn to experts like Josh Wilkins, who's joining me here. Josh has got 29 years of experience in the wildfire space, having worked for San Bernardino, and now he works at his own company called
Fireline Solutions.
Fireline Solutions. There you go. Josh, how are you? And welcome to the podcast.
Great, Steve. Well, I'm doing awesome, and it's a pleasure to be chatting with you again on all things wildfire.
Right, we've spoken offline, many times over the last few years, and your advice was very helpful in developing the product line that Team Wildfire is building right now. So I thank you for your wisdom. I was going to say advice, but it's really more wisdom. Advice is, worth what you pay for it. Well, actually, I didn't pay you anything, so I got free wisdom, which is, I consider myself ahead. So tell me, what do you see going on in the wildfire space right now? How has it changed? And what are we going to do about it?
Well,
you could answer all that. Boy, we'd be done.
Yeah. Where do you start with that one?
Right.
Well, I think wildfire right now, we're at a pivotal point. And whereas we've seen much larger fires than, in years past, much larger devastation. And folks are starting to realize that there's something bigger than just, the smoke in the air, and it's just on the West Coast. It's a huge problem. And I mean, one of the newest stats that came out recently was annually, the economic impact for wildfire is from 200, which is very low, up to $800 billion in economic impact. That's almost 3% of our GDP, depending on which way you go. The lowest number is still something that's never been talked about. And it's touching everybody to where they might not even see smoke in the air. But like in, for say the Texas wildfire recently, they're going to see their beef prices go up. They're going to see entire industries that were never affected by wildfire before get dramatically, affected, and cost to everybody gets shared. I mean, beef prices will go up because of that, because of the loss of, so many cattle in that area and that industry. And not counting the oil industry and the different oil fields that were affected, or the power. And that's just one fire. One fire in springtime of all things. Million-acre fire. So the narratives are changing. It's no longer a fire season. It's now a year-round event. And it's, the health impacts, the infrastructure impacts is massive. And I think the government is starting to pay attention, not nearly as much as we hope, but they are. Industry, insurance companies, obviously everybody's, seeing what's happening with the insurance companies, which has a massive trickle-down effect onto the housing, and real estate industry, because folks that are impacted and lose their insurance because of wildfire risk, now that impacts them on even being able to sell their home or purchase a home, because you cannot get insurance for it. So unless you're paying cash outright, you cannot even purchase a home because you can't get insurance for it. So there's a lot of interesting trickle-down effects that folks are starting to wake up to, and it's impacting them personally, even though they've never seen smoke or they've never had wildfire affected to them. So we're in a really unique spot right now, kind of like 9/11. And whereas, we never thought in a million years that something like that could happen to us in the United States. And it did. And it affected a lot of people personally, especially the fire community. But everybody, across the board. And the government, in that case, stood up entire agencies to address that and to prevent that from happening again. Unfortunately, we've had the Camp Fire and the Lahaina Fire that should be the equivalent of those 9/11s. of a 9/11 scale event. And we should have the same focus, the same understanding that prevention needs to happen, because $200 to $800 billion in economic impact every year it's nothing to blink at. So that's kind of where I see, where we are right now. And technology has a play because, we're an innovative nation, and, in the world in general, we need to start pivoting and using that technology to address how we prevent these type of catastrophes.
So you said the government should be doing more. I agree. But what they are doing is they're convening, panels of fire experts who have expertise in the way fire used to be. And then they're taking the recommendations of these panels based on the fact that they have consensus on what to do. That always scares me because, 100 years ago, the consensus on how to treat almost any ailment was leeches or bleeding. And so I don't think that consensus necessarily gives you the best answer. There might just be one person there who said, "What about antibiotics?" Shut up. No one's voting for you.
Exactly.
Right. So how do we make sure that we protect innovative ideas from the quenching effect of consensus?
Well, and I agree. Unfortunately, there's millions of reports and white papers and documents out there that are pointing to this or that. The problem is that's where they stop. And nobody actually puts them to use, where they're a major research, and they ultimately create this amazing white paper on the solution. It stops there. And we need to take it from there to applying it in the real world with end users that are actually going to use it. And show, just like, the military has the same problem. It's how do you show that the end users can use it in the battlefield, or in this case, the fire ground? And how do you validate that without just a hypothesis, or this white paper says this, or, this one says that? And so that's one of my biggest concerns is we've researched it to death, and we need to start taking action on it. And that's going to require funding, but we have the potential. It's the one natural disaster that we try to control, and that we have the ability to be proactive with. And without trying new things, we're not going to get anywhere. We're always going to be the same reactive, it burnt down another community and hundreds more people died. Let's replay it again next year. That's not acceptable anymore. And we need to rethink how we do things, just like the military is trying to rethink how they're doing things, whether it's contracting or making sure that the actual, the soldier on the ground is going to use it and not get shelved and waste billions of dollars, in the meantime. The beauty is all the technology that, half the technology the military actually is working on or using can be directly applied to, the wildfire problem, whether it's real-time intelligence or, the different applications with aviation, with drones, with all kinds of emerging technologies. They're just 20 years ahead of us, as far as if you consider it an industry, a wildfire, industry, they're 20 years ahead of us. So to me, there's hope, but that only goes so far. We need action. And we need, industries, communities, to get together and say, okay, let's put all this, even if it is, you get pushback, let's at least try it. Let's push the edges of the envelope, because otherwise, if we don't, we know what's going to happen next year and the year after and the year after. Pretty soon, we're not going to have much left, and we're going to say, what could have we have done? By then, it's too late. So. We're in a unique situation, but there's a lot of stuff we can learn from, like the military or from NASA. There's plenty of crossovers that we can embrace and learn from. We already paid for it with our tax dollars. Let's learn from it. You know?
Right. So why is an American life worth a different response based on whether the threat was caused by somebody in another country or by a fire in this country? Like, isn't dead is dead, right? It
Yeah.
shouldn't matter. And so I don't know why, if somebody gets killed by, foreigners, like, oh, we're going to spend $1 billion to tackle this problem. But if
Yeah.
100 people die, in a fire, that's just considered that's a civilian issue, and we'll just let civilian technology focus on that. And I think that's really a very narrow view of homeland security.
Yeah. Well, and traditionally wildfires been tied to, like weather events, like a tornado or a hurricane, where we really have no control over what Mother Nature does as far as when it puts down a tornado or when we get impacted by a hurricane. Those are massive weather events. And it's been coupled with those natural disasters. Whereas this, we can actually, because 80%, I'll say, is human caused anyway, whether it's human ignited or because we moved into areas that naturally burn on an annual basis to become, resilient. And we need to separate those two. We can actually be proactive and get back to a state where we can live with fire. How it always, for millions of years, that's how forests regenerate and grasslands regenerated. We decided to build in those areas now, and now we've determined that as the enemy. And over the past 100 years, that's where it's become more exaggerated, because we are putting fires out the second they start. And so now the fuel has become like unbearably unmanageable, to where it's overgrowing. Our communities are within these areas now. And so the natural, the cleaning effect of fire is no longer there. So we're a tinderbox every day. There are going to be bad fires, and we do have to mitigate those, but we need to get back to a balance to where we can live with good fire. And that good fire is putting good fire on the ground, letting it do its thing, regenerate and clean out the overgrowth, instead of letting those mega fires just wipe out entire communities, and then wonder what could have we done differently. So that's a big narrative that's really changing in the past, I'd say 5 years or less, is, okay, we need to put good fire on the ground. We need to start mitigating some of these fuel loads. There's money being put towards that, but there's not a lot of bite behind it as far as actually enacting, whether it's manpower or whole departments, kind of like a DHS, to where that's their mission. DHS's mission is, Homeland Security. There's no greater, homeland than the ones that are burning up right now. So, but the missions are similar, but they're not. How do you define DHS's part in that, or anything like that? So I digress. I go down a rabbit hole sometimes.
Well, it's a good rabbit hole, though.
Yeah.
The Department of Homeland Security. This is my home. It's surrounded by land. The land is on fire. It threatens my home.
Yeah.
I don't know. What could be more relevant?
Yeah, and that's, if we had just a fraction of the DoD budget to address this, imagine the return on investment.
Right.
We're getting impacted by $200 to $800 billion. You put in a tiny fraction of that, and the return could be massive. And it doesn't matter what state you live in, you are impacted. If you've never had a wildfire in your state, the health costs that just went up because of all the smoke in the air, like I said, the cattle prices, all those things, you are getting impacted. It's just nobody's really connected the dots and realize, oh, it actually touches me personally. This is a thing, just like 9/11, to where I could be affected. My insurance could disappear. I might not be able to sell my home, and that was my my investment strategy because I invested in this, or multifamily or whatever. So how can we make folks realize that it does touch you no matter where you live in the United States? You are affected by wildfire. And we need to come together, politics aside. We don't even have to call it climate change or leave that out.
Right.
We're burning up. And if we don't do something, we're going to lose a lot of the stuff that we always took for granted, insurance. That industry could actually disappear with a combination of the natural disasters that already happen, like hurricanes and floods and everything else. It's becoming a really hard business model. But this is the one we can actually mitigate and reduce the risk. So if you don't have a flood risk, if you're not in a hurricane area, if you don't have tornadoes, we can at least reduce the risk for wildfire and preserve, and it's not a right, it's a privilege to get insurance, but it's something we've always taken, granted for. And imagine life without homeowners insurance. That's one of the oldest industries in the United States. But unless we start doing something now, it might disappear, at least for the homeowners insurance.
Very interesting. You talked about connecting the dots, and you mentioned several agencies, right? You mentioned the DHS, the DoD, you mentioned NASA, and I've got to think that if the agencies and the universities and the research facilities and the experienced firefighters could pool the knowledge, we would be much more likely to come up with solutions. But it seems that the knowledge is very siloed.
Yeah.
What's your experience with that?
Well, and I just put on a workshop last week with an international group addressing just that. And, we had, folks from MIT and Berkeley and some NASA folks, a lot of folks from industry and government, Australia, Germany. And, it's a common problem around the world. But, yeah, we do have a lot of, like in research and development, massive silos to where a lot of these folks, in academia, they want to solve this problem. This is one of those passion projects. Like they really want to solve it, whether they were touched personally by it or it's just a really good mission. They run into roadblocks because data is siloed in so many different places, and it's really hard to access, data sets that might help their algorithm or their fire behavior model or whatever the new cutting edge thing that they literally are cutting edge, but they can't connect that or finalize that connection without that validation or that data. And so, creating a data commons for everything wildfire is one of the big topics that we're talking about right now, to where it's open source. If it is wildfire related, and it's especially if it's publicly funded, it needs to go into one place so everybody has access to it. And now we're into the generation to where we can have real-time information. And that was one of the key focuses in the workshop was we have access to real-time weather data. We have access to, all kinds of real-time video feeds. We have the capability to pipe it into our supercomputer that's sitting in our pocket.
Yep.
No different than right now, you could pull out your phone and tell what the weather's doing or when the storm front's going to hit or if the tornado is heading your way. How can we do that with wildfire? Why can't we do that with wildfire?
I have a feeling that we can, but we don't.
We don't. And a lot of it, unfortunately, because wildfires lives within the fire community, per se. And traditionally, which unfortunately the fire service, fortunately and unfortunately, very, very traditional. And we have a culture is, really hard to change. But we've always deemed it as almost like top secret information, to where is the fire right now? Well, we can't tell you. We have to validate it through 20 different people and then get approved by the incident commander. And then that might have to go even to Washington, D.C. or whatever.
And then the PIO.
And
right?
the PIO. And
Right.
that was built on tradition and how we've always done operations in the past. Well, we haven't pivoted from that to accept the new real-time world we live in. You know, we're a digital age. We have AI. We have all these amazing technologies, but we're not pivoting to address those new capabilities. And just simple. I mean, like, here's exactly where the fire is. Boom, you hit one button, and everybody in the world can know at the same time. So there's little things that we need to address within the incident command structure in the fire service world. And we need to train our folks on how to operate with real-time information, no different than, say, the generals did when they first transitioned, you know, into the digital world. Imagine a general going from, you know, his paper maps or sand tables and, you know, how they used to do things to a digital, like, you know, fusion center or, you know, data from satellites. And one, it's like, how can I trust this information? This is life or death. I need to trust this information. Well, they got over that hump. You know, they found processes to get over that and to adapt to it. And now, you know, try taking that technology away from them. There's no way. You know, they have drones in their airspace with their airplanes, which is a big concern in the fire space. The military's been through this, and we've paid billions of dollars to figure it out. So that is something that, you know, it's a low-hanging fruit. It's just let's pick the right ones and move on. Okay, now we can actually catch up in that 20-year gap to where now we're only 10 years behind. And the next year we might only be 2 years behind because we're using all the knowledge that we've paid for. And a lot of it with lives, you know, military lives or firefighter lives. You know, we need to really just step back and look, you know, what can we do right now that's already being done? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need a whole nother budget. We're going to take the best from the military, the best from NASA, the best from DHS, Department of Innovation Unit. You know, it's an amazing agency that's been stood up to solve this same exact problem, but for the military. Imagine the stuff we could pull from that, you know. And then now new technologies that come in aren't as scary because it's that trust factor. You know, if you don't have the trust, I wouldn't want to trust something if I didn't know that it actually worked. So let's create those things, those processes to validate those technologies to where now I can trust it, just like my phone. I trust my phone to tell me where the weather is.
Right.
Or if there's traffic jam on Waze, or we rely on so many different things right now, every single day that has direct effect on what we do. So that's one of my key focuses right now is, you know, and again, I say it a lot. I love connecting those dots. And to have folks have those aha moments, especially in a space where we can save an entire community or communities and firefighter lives and civilian lives and reduce the impact of our economy. That's a cool fight to fight, you know,
Right.
and, you know, I'm not afraid to say the quiet parts out loud because I'm not attached to an agency anymore. And, you know, it's a good thing and a bad thing. I miss it like no tomorrow. But, you know, once you're in an agency or organization, everybody knows that you tend not to say what you really think. And sometimes if you do, you might lose your job or you might get demoted or, you know, because it offended somebody. And, you know, I enjoy not offending people, but bringing out those things, you know, and saying the quiet parts out loud, you know, being politically correct, but making sure that they understand the impact of what we're talking about is massive and way beyond you or me or anybody else. So,
yeah, when we think about the value of recycled goods, I think one of the the most underutilized of them is retired people, right, who have amassed, 20, 30, 40 years of experience through a career. And now we have the opportunity to reuse that wisdom outside of the constraints that they were under when they, were agency people. So I think that's a great resource for solving any problem.
Yeah. And that's, to me, it would almost be criminal not to share what I know.
Yeah.
And two, in the fire service in general, we're really struggling to find that next generation of folks. And across the board, we're all at, retirement age. So we're losing massive amounts of intelligence, as far as, or experience. To where a lot of this stuff is from the gut. But if we can transition those gut, decision-making skills or those knowledge, take that knowledge base and synthesize it in a way we can utilize it and pass it on, somehow, some way with a human in a loop, but,
Right.
Creating decision support systems that can enhance or take that experience from all these amazing people that have literally made it their life, their life career. That is how, to me, it would just be criminal not to use that, that experience. And that's, why I'm sitting in front of you.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah. And what you were able to just say in one sentence took me 55 pages to write up in a patent. But, I'm creating a technology called Deep Red. It's basically it is to fire what Deep Blue was to chess, right? And then you teach a software the rules of the game, the rules of engagement, the capacities of any given piece of fire apparatus. You incorporate the fire modeling, fire behavior, weather patterns, all in real time. And then that tells you how to play chess against this 100,000-acre fire, in real time in a way that people only think that they can. But if you put that, if you could, right, and that's what I would like to do, right, is figure out what questions would we have to ask of people who've spent 40 years developing that gut instinct, so that wisdom could then be passed into an AI, and then made use of by people who have much less experience.
Yeah,
and I think that's a perfect use of AI. Is
even outside just the fire space, as far as community, whether it's a county supervisor or a governor, congressman, to be able to make their decisions easier with their jobs, because that's one thing that within the fire space, it's really hard to get information. I used to be a public information officer, and it's really hard to get information outside of the fire service bubble, especially when, time is of the essence. The monster is literally coming down the mountain. And, you think about all the different folks that if they had the same information, the real-time intelligence, just like the weather app.
like watch duty. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. You could actually do your job better, whether you are a congressman or, some kind of stakeholder within your power, and be progressive within your bubble, whether it's evacuating a hospital ahead of time because it's going to take this many hours instead of waiting for the sirens and the sheriff coming around saying, get out.
Exactly.
Or
a lot easier for the sheriff to do an evacuation if the people know that he's on his way and that the evacuation order has been issued.
Yeah. If they know, okay, there is a problem. It's not just, this isn't going to pass by. This isn't just going to be a distant smoke column, or utility companies, or there's so many different stakeholders. Everybody deserves to know, just like the weather, hey, we're going to get impacted by something massive that could kill us all in, potentially minutes. But in order to evacuate, say, Malibu or downtown LA or anywhere else that's surrounded by wildland urban interface, that's a massive logistical challenge. We just saw that in Chile. entire community, a downtown community was just obliterated because they didn't have enough time to physically get out. You can only put so many people through the straw, whether
Right.
it's a freeway or whatever it is. So, as hurricanes, we have some notice. It's a slow moving thing. It's even we have models that are going to kind of tell us where it's going to go.
Right.
We're not there yet with fire. And if we are, it's not publicly known, So those are the things that I'm really passionate about as well, is how do we get the public empowered with the same information? It's not top secret.
And entrusted, right? I just finished
Yeah.
reading a book called The Unthinkable. And one of the precepts in that book is that public officials don't believe that the public will be able to make responsible use of information if they're given access to it.
Yeah.
Right? That this rumor, or this misbelief that, if we tell them what's happening, they'll panic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe they'll just actually pack and leave before evacuation orders are given, in which case less strain on the straw, right? Because people can make their decisions sooner.
Well, and imagine like right now, we have tsunami alerts, we have earthquake alerts, we have, storm alerts, all these amazing alerts that go out right now. And it doesn't create chaos. It actually helps. I mean, luckily we haven't, been able to test a lot of the tsunami type stuff, but those exist. And they're made to go off the second they know there's a potential tsunami coming. So there's no reason why we can't do the same thing with wildfire. There is none. And I know that, there's going to be folks out there who say, no, we can't do that. No, that's just not how we do it. Well, it needs to be how it's done, especially if it's funded by, your agency is funded by the taxpayers. Everybody deserves to know when their life is in danger. We have terrorism alerts, and this, it needs to happen for wildfire. And so it's a culture change, and it's really ingrained, unfortunately. But it's easily changeable once we identify it and just say, oh, okay, we can actually pivot really easy. We just need to train our folks on how to deal with this new way, just like the generals did 20 years ago. So that's where I have some hope, and I am excited that we can get there. But there's going to be a lot of political pushback too, because no, that's just not how we've done it. And it should not be, as hard as we make it. So it's an interesting, interesting problem.
Yeah, we have to stop thinking about wildfire and wildfire casualties as, acts of God, or however people characterize those things, right? Because when we do that, then we can add the idea of liability.
Yeah.
Right. When we knew COVID was coming, the people who decided to do nothing, like, they were held accountable for deaths in their countries.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, but when a wildfire hits and 200 people died, we're like, oh, well, there wasn't anything that could be done about it. But if we can show that, yes, there were things that could be done about it, but you didn't do them, then, you're going to have some liability for that.
Yeah. And you really look at it, the bigger piece of the pie is human caused. We, as the civilians here, we created this. And whether it is negligence or just not knowing, we built in the wrong place, or we didn't remove the fuel that could have been easily mitigated to solve this major catastrophe. We all rely on power, and unfortunately our fuel loads is impacting our infrastructure on, the energy. But imagine life without power, so, okay, we gotta have both. How do we live with both? But, it all comes down to majority of it. I mean, there's a small fraction of it that's lightning caused. Okay.
Right.
But a majority of it is we cause it, whether it's infrastructure that was built to benefit us, or, we built into that area, or our car caught on fire. We couldn't have, it caught on fire alongside the freeway, which then completely wiped out a town.
Right.
Those little things that, most of it is not out of, malice or anything like that. It's accidental. It's human nature. It's really what it is. So how do we adapt to it using the stuff that we know now? The technologies that we have now. And, it's an easy pivot once we get enough people to recognize we can do this.
Right. You're suggesting that that there's a way to let people know about wildfires who didn't happen to drive past the fire station that day and see where the needle had been manually put, low, medium, high, right? So right now you have to specifically sign up for apps if you want notifications about that. But that should be as automatic as checking the weather.
Yeah.
Right. Alexa, what's my fire danger today?
Yeah. And hats off to, to like Watch Duty.
Yes.
It's a nonprofit that they want to put as much information in the power of everybody's hands as they can. And that is actually making a difference. I mean, it was actually used in Texas. They hadn't even launched there yet, and it was
right.
probably
They did an emergency launch to get on top of that.
And it was one of the most used resources, and it's probably one of the best intelligence resources in the entire state. Imagine all the volunteer fire departments that don't have a lot of great technology, but they were actually able to see where the perimeter was, what the winds were, what's going on around them. Even though they didn't have connection with the radio, they were actually able to see, the intelligence, and the residents, the same thing. Okay, it's hitting our ranch right now. Let's get everybody out and do all our things. Or it's hitting our town. Now the mayor can actually act on what they know, because as we all know and we've all seen, it's usually just complete chaos. I mean, the true definition of the fog of war is when a wildfire comes through your town. Everything, all plans, everything goes out the window, and it's literally save yourself and, throw fire here or throw water there. And, half the time you can't see what's going on because of the smoke or because of the wind or whatever it is. So that is like, the true fog of war, and this helps lift it in a sense. But it shouldn't be just a nonprofit that it actually does that. And it should be everybody, just like with the Weather Service, and they figured it out. They had the same problem when they were trying to, how do we disseminate this weather information to the public and the processes that went to that. Like NOAA, they figured it out. And now we have, the benefit of having the weather on our phone.
Right. And you could settle for the NOAA version or whatnot, or because this knowledge is important to you, you can buy a better form of that information. Right. There's, at least a dozen, there's My Radar and there's AccuWeather and there's all these other programs, because these companies realized that this data is valuable to people and they will pay to receive it in the best format.
Yeah. And so there's entire industries that could be built around this, as you know. And, before, like even, the venture capital and the startup world, it was kind of frowned upon because, well, that's kind of dependent on government contracts. Right. And it didn't really meet the thesis of, the traditional venture capital, missions. That's changing. And they're starting to realize, and especially the ones that do specialize in, say, climate, technologies or stuff like that. They're realizing there is a huge connection, and they're starting to pay attention. And there's also industries that are standing up now, like, like Google. They're starting to, put more focus on wildfire and their R&D. There's whole industries developing, for this problem worldwide. I talk to folks all across the world, and it's amazing now that they're like, oh, wait a minute, this technology that we've had now applies to this problem. And they're excited. And I'm excited. You know, it's one of those new awakenings that, oh, we can actually make a difference and
So how do,
and have a business.
yes. So how do we take the fear out of fire agencies that they're going to be replaced just because some private players get in the business? You know, we have a police department here. Well, that doesn't stop my bank from deciding that they're going to hire private security to protect their money. And that doesn't threaten police officer jobs, you know, or technology, right? It makes it a little bit easier on them because, you know, there's local resources. You know, companies have their own security departments. So
a lot of
the
it's
privatization of certain aspects of, you know, of fire suppression or fire mitigation should be welcomed by the government side of the fire service.
Yeah. Well,
But
especially if it's going to make their jobs easier.
Right.
You know, if they don't have to go through all these steps now and have all this extra, not extra manpower per se, but all these extra procedures that they have to go through, knowing that, well, wait a minute, why do I get the weather on my map on my phone, but I have to go through all these procedural steps just to get the perimeter of a fire out, which by the time it gets out, it's 24 hours old.
Right.
So all we're doing is we're providing historical information. Well, the fire was here 24 hours ago, because by the time it goes through the process, this is this is the end product. The sad part is we're still operating in that historical environment. The firefighters on the ground are operating when you go off, you get your, day shift or night shift. Before your shift, you have a safety briefing, an incident briefing, and you're provided a map of where the fire was 24 hours ago, because it had to go through that process.
Right.
And it was a picture in time. And if you've never been in this area before, you came across the country to fight this wildfire, you now step onto a battleground where we're operating on 24-hour-old information in unknown territory. I've never been in this place in my life. And take, for example, night shift. Now it's dark, so I can't even get my bearings because it's pitch black and all you could see is just the flames and, the road. So if we can now pivot that to where, we have the same access to that real-time information because the processes were streamlined. And that's going to take, some training. That's going to take some potentially new positions, in the incident command system, but all to benefit. The military had the same problem. They had to develop whole new tactics because now we have real-time information. It's like, wow, we can actually get ahead of the enemy instead of just playing catch up. Like, oh, he's over here now, so let's react to that. Whereas we do the same thing in the fires. We still, to this day, we just react. Whether it's a mega fire or a tiny little campfire, we just react. So if we become proactive using these amazing technologies, and I'm not saying, technology is the answer. It has to be incorporated with, the humans actually doing the work. But if we can actually get ahead of the game and be ahead of the fire by 7 steps instead of always being just chasing its tail, in essence, especially a fast-moving fire like Lahaina. If you have 70-mile-an-hour winds pushing that thing, you're going to be chasing it. You're never going to get ahead of it unless you have good knowledge of what's coming, where it's going, how fast it's going, and now you can actually deploy your resources in an efficient way because we have very little resources to go around, and we're getting less and less every day with the federal staffing issue right now. So how do we go from reactive to proactive? And this is key. This is the one piece that, and again, I'm not making this up because the military has again proven this. So that's where I think, I'm hopeful. I know that we can do this. It's just these little barriers, whether it's political, bureaucracy, policy, training, we got to train some folks in a different way. But once we do it, we're done. Now we can move on. Just, So I know it's possible.
Well, I like your optimism, Josh. It is possible. Now the question is just whether it's probable, and what can we do to increase the probability of adoption of these new technologies. When Steve Jobs invented the iPhone, they said, how are you going to go up against the establishment? How are you going to go up against Motorola? How are you going to go up against AT&T? And he said, I don't have to compete with them. I just have to do something that makes them obsolete.
Yeah.
And I think, the fire service will have a choice, either, lead that or become more obsolete in wildfire spaces. Just you and I are old enough to remember what it used to take to send an international piece of mail. Right? You had to figure out what country it was going to, how much we had to pay our government to move it, how much we had to pay their government to deliver it. And it was a very long, tiresome process. And then all of a sudden, FedEx, DHL, solving these problems, not just domestically, but internationally in any country, in a way that's so much more efficient that who would ever take a letter to the post office if you wanted to get it to Germany the next day? Like, it's just
and it
not gonna
benefits
happen.
everybody. I mean, the government, it benefits the government, it benefits all its end users, but it's a larger scale of efficiency too. It makes sense. Yeah, there is a business behind it, and yeah, they might make millions of dollars, but it makes our lives better. And so,
or billions, actually. I'm not going to cap it at millions.
Yeah,
but.
yeah. So, but that's the thing, is it's not going to replace, technology is not going to replace a position in the fire department. It's going to make it more efficient,
And safer, hopefully.
Yeah, and much safer.
I mean, when you worked in San Bernardino and you interfaced with Cal Fire, you're working with the most sophisticated wildfire agency on the planet, which still struggles to contain fires.
Yeah.
But let's say you take that fire over to Chile or Greece or south of France or Turkey, like much less experienced agencies, much less technology available, and those countries I think would benefit the most from
definitely, and
private firefighters force
it's not
coming
just
in.
a U.S. problem. It's an international problem, and Australia is like the Southern California. I mean, it's like the West Coast. They have the same problem, but they're also much more forward on the government side, and they are pushing the technologies and they are trying new things. So there's stuff that we can learn from them, and then vice versa. But it affects everybody whether we like it or not. And we happen to have a lot of them here. But you look at poor Greece. Their islands are getting devastated. They don't have the acreage to spare. Where we have millions of acres. So it's a big international problem, and there's so many stakeholders that need it to be fixed, or just lose everything.
Yeah, you wonder how bad does the problem have to get before changing becomes less painful than persisting.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Josh, if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to keep up with the research that you're working on and stay abreast of your thought leadership in this community?
Well, I'm big on LinkedIn, and that's probably my best social platform, and or just firelinesolutions.net. And I'm always happy to reach out and have those conversations. Like, again, it'd be criminal for me not to share this, this kind of stuff. So
I hope you never get charged.
Yeah.
Right. No, but I really love your attitude about that. That you and many other people have accumulated a lot of wisdom, at expense to yourself and to the people who've perished along the way. And boy, we're going to set ourselves back an awful lot, if we don't take advantage of plugging that wisdom into whatever the future solution is going to be.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Thank you for your service, and thank you for your pass it on attitude.
No, thank you, Steve.
Absolutely. We will definitely be doing this again soon. My guest today, Josh Wilkins, FirelineSolutions.net, or LinkedIn, which is where I spend most of my day as well. Thanks so much for joining us, Josh, and thank you all for listening and watching. And really, on this episode, you should be watching, not listening, because Josh has the most amazing mustache, and you're going to miss it if you're just, listening on Spotify. Thanks for joining us. This is the Fire Break. We're sponsored by Team Wildfire. We'll see you at the next one. Take care.